project that you're currently working on. So I would just be focusing the discussion today on the final manuscript that you would be working on. So the following files would be made available in your Canvas. If it's not yet available in your Canvas, then this would be made available later. But I guess for some of the classes, the files are already available. So we have here a PowerPoint presentation on citations and referencing. Let me just open this. So this is a PowerPoint presentation. We will not be discussing this anymore because it is assumed that in at this point of time you should actually be familiar with this, because even in the undergrad we follow the same styles in citing our references and in listing our sources of the study. So you just make use of this presentation as basis if there are things that you need to recall or things that you need to clarify with your citation. So this presentation, there are around 30 plus slides in this presentation, would give you an overview on how you should be citing your references in the manuscript. So we'll not be discussing this. So for example, if you would want to cite a paper in your study, there are several ways of doing this, and there are actually rules that must be followed. So this is just one of the samples and rules that would be followed in citing a reference. So it may be possible for you to include the source as part of your discussion, or you could just discuss the idea and then include the source in your discussions. So in the first bullet, you would see that um, the the source is included as part of the discussion by citing the reference author and the year when the author published the reference. Similarly, in the third bullet, it's the same, citing the author and the date when the author published the source directly in your discussion. Or the second bullet, um, I see a lot of students using the second bullet as well, where you discuss the ideas and concepts in your own words, and then before you end the statement, you would have an open and close parenthesis containing in it the name of the author or authors and the year when the author or authors published the source. So as I mentioned, this particular slide is just one of the slides that would show you some samples on how you would be citing your sources and references. And of course, this is just one. There are other things that should be considered, like what if there is no date of publication? So the date of publication is not available, or what if the name of the author is not included in the publication or in the article that you are using, and so on. So this would guide you, this would help you. How about if there are two or more authors? What if the idea that you are using is also something that was cited by another author? So meaning the paper that you are citing is not, or yeah, the paper that you're citing is not the original source of that idea. So how are you gonna do that? And so on. So there are around 30 slides. So I want you to go over this presentation. So as I mentioned, this presentation would help you in refreshing, recalling how to cite references. So this is another PowerPoint presentation. This PowerPoint presentation will also give you an idea on the requirement for Capstone Project, to particularly the parts of the manuscript. So I also want you to go over this, but we'll not be using this presentation for this orientation. Instead, we'll go directly to the actual sample manuscript. So the second PowerPoint presentation would give you an idea on how to write the parts of the paper. But for our discussion this afternoon, I would go directly to the template. Now, there are two files here. The first is a document file, and the second is a PDF file. So the document file with title manuscript template and the PDF file which has the same title manuscript template are actually the same. They contain the same things. The only reason why I uploaded both a document file and a PDF file is that sometimes if we upload some documents and we download these documents in Canvas, there are distortions in the format of the documents. So this is the reason why I also included here a PDF file. So meaning if you're gonna work on your final manuscript, you download the document file and use that as your working document, but you also download the PDF file for you to see what are the distortions, changes that happen with the format of the document file when you downloaded it. So what I'll be using would be the PDF file. So in this PDF file, there are around 20 pages. Yeah, 21 pages for this template. So if you are gonna write your final manuscript, the first page would be the title page. So your title page would look something like this. So that's the title page. So that's how the title page would look like. So in the title page, you have there the title of your study. So it's found on the topmost part of the title page. So you have here the title of your study. The title of your study should be written in all caps, bold, and in inverted pyramid form. And then below, you have there a description of the document. You just copy this as is. A capstone project presented to the faculty of the graduate school, College of Information Technology and Computer Science, University of the Cordilleras, in partial fulfillment of the requirements for the degree Master in Information Technology. So you just copy this as is. And then below, you have there your name. Your name would also be in all caps. Your first name, middle name, family name. So your complete first name, middle name, family name, not the middle initial. And then below your name, you type there the month and the year of your defense. So if you will defend, say for example, November, regardless of the day, does not matter what day of November, then you write there November 2023. If you will defend on January, so that will be January 2024. If you will defend on December, so that will be December 2023. Regardless of the day. So you do not write there the day. So that's the title page. Now, aside from the title page, we have the approval sheet. So this is how the approval sheet would look like. In the approval sheet, you just fill in the items that are in capital letters. So you have here this capstone project entitled, you type here the title of your study. Do not bolden the letters. Just type in capital letters. So type the capstone project in capital letters, not bold. Prepared and submitted by your first name, your middle name, and your last name, family name. In partial fulfillment of the requirements for the degree Master in Information Technology. Of course, you do not change the Master in Information Technology, and so on. And then below, you write there the name of your advisor, followed by the degree. So if, say, for example, your advisor is, who's an example of an advisor? Um, Melinda A. Bininsig, comma, MIT, advisor. And then below, you write the name of the panel members. During your final defense, we will be joined by a third panel member because during your Capstone Project 1 initial defense, we were only joined by two internal panel members plus the advisor. During your final defense, we will be inviting an external panel member. And as we have mentioned during your presentations in Capstone Project 1, you may recommend an external panel member and we will evaluate and we will decide whether the one that you have recommended would be invited or not. So do not tell yet the person that you are planning to invite about the invitation. So we'll be the one to invite if ever the person is qualified. So that's the external panel member. And of course, there's a requirement. Your external panel member, whoever you would be recommending, should be a graduate of any ITE master's degree. So could be a graduate of a master's in computer science, or a master's in information technology, or a master's in information systems. And then below, you have their panel of examiners. So again, you just write there the name of the panel members. And then the GPC and then the name of the dean will be fixed. No need to change. So what you will just enter here for this page would be the title of your study, your name, and the name of the advisor and the panel members. So for your initial document, one of the panel members' name would be blank. And then we have here the capstone abstract. So this is the next page, capstone abstract. The capstone abstract would contain the following. So we have there the title. So you type the title of your study, all caps and bold. And then the total number of pages. From the title page of up to the last page of your manuscript, how many pages are there all in all? If we say text number of pages, you just count the number of pages of your chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. So chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4, I repeat. You just count the number of pages from chapters 1 to chapter 4. So that's the text number of pages. And then for the authors, you just type your name there. So there should only be one name there. Sorry, there are three names there because the format that we are using in the masters is the same format that we are using in the undergrad. And in the undergrad, we have 3 students per study. So you just remove the 2 slots for the author, and then you just write your name there. And of course, that should now be author, not authors. And then type of document, that's project study. Type of publication, unpublished. Accrediting institution is the name of the school. And then the sponsor, this is for scholars. If you are a scholar, you type there the agency that provided your scholar. If you are not a scholar, you remove number 6. So number 6 will only be for scholars. So whether you are a scholar of CHED, or you're a scholar of the UST, or you are a scholar of your school, you write there the name of the one who provided your or who supported you. But if you are not a scholar, you remove number 6. So number 7 will become number 6, number 8 will become number 7. So 8.1 will become 7.1 for non-scholars. And then you have their keywords. Keywords are lifted normally from the title. So if ever your paper will be placed in a database, what are the keywords that would be associated to your paper, so that if future researchers would browse and type some keywords in that database, your paper would be included in the list of papers that would be given to the one searching. So these are keywords. And then you have abstracts. The first part of the abstracts part would be the rationale and background of the study. So rationale slash background of the study. So insert here a short discussion on the reason why you are conducting the study. So that's what you will be writing in the rationale or background of the study. Why did you conduct this study? Of course, you do not say there because it's a requirement of the MIT program. So it's really more on what problem do you want to address, and what would be the benefits that stakeholders would gain from your study. So it's really more on what contribution would your study give to the stakeholders. So that's what you would be highlighting in the rationale or background of the study. So initially, you would be putting here the problem that you want to address, and then how you plan to address it. Just an overview. But do not write in the rationale or background of the study any details on your methodology and findings. I repeat, do not write any details on your methodology and findings and the rationale and background of the study. And then 8.2 is summary. So you insert here the problem that you want to address, the objectives, and an overview of the methodology. So that's the summary. So in reality, the summary means you summarize chapter 1 and chapter 2. Or if you would see it on the parts of the paper, you may think that the rationale or background of the study is a summary of your chapter 1. And then your summary 8.2 is a summary of your chapter 2. And then your 8.3 is a summary of your chapter 3. And then it follows that your 8.4 is a summary of your chapter um chapter 4. And likewise 8.5 is also your chapter 4. So under 8.3, you just give a summary here of your answers to the statements of the problem or the objectives of the study. You were given during your Capstone Project 1 presentation, you were given a final list of objectives or final list of problems. So that's what you would be answering here. So if you have 4 final list of problems or objectives, then there would be 4 items here. But if there are only 3, then there would only be 3. I guess in most of the studies that we have seen last term, if I'm mistaken, most of you were given 3 statements of the problems or statement of the objectives or objectives of the study. There are also those who were given 4. But I know nobody has 2, 1, or more than 4. It's either 3 or 4. So treat each of the statements of the problem, the findings, as a paragraph. So that's findings. And then you have here conclusions. So 8.4 is conclusions. Under conclusions, you go back to the findings and then you just write there what have you learned. So what are your contributions to the body of knowledge? What are your contributions to the learning process when you achieve the objectives or the achieve the objectives or answer the questions, I should say. So you have here the conclusions. So you would notice the findings and the conclusions will be 1:1. So your conclusion number 1 is aligned to findings number 1. Your conclusion number 2 is aligned to finding number 2. Conclusion number 3 is aligned to finding number 3. So one good example is if in your findings, so for example, statement of the problem number 1 would be what are the requirements. So in the findings, you will enumerate the requirements to design and develop the proposed system are the following. So you enumerate what are the requirements. And then in your conclusion, you would say that probably you could say here that in order for the proposed system or in order for a system, so you could mention what type of system that is. In order for an information system or in order for an enrollment system to be designed and developed, certain information requirements are needed. And these information requirements are crucial in the design stage, in the development stage, and in the evaluation stage of the system. So that's what you have learned, and that's your conclusion. So be very careful that in the conclusion, you do not repeat the findings. So if in your statement of the problem number 1, what are the requirements? So in your findings number 1, you enumerate the requirements. But in conclusion number 1, do not enumerate again the requirements. And say for example, if statement of the problem number 3 will be what is the level of usability. So in your findings number 3, you just discuss there what's the result of the usability test. So the usability test, when the system was tested by the target users, resulted to a value of 3.5, which means that it's so on and so forth. So similarly, in conclusion number 3, you do not repeat what you have learned. Instead, you would mention there, or you do not repeat what you have computed, the findings. Instead, you would state there what you have learned. So probably you would say something like, you have learned that in this study, the design and development of an information system that involves these data are or can be well designed and can be acceptable by target users and the like. So you do not mention again in the conclusion what you have found from the findings. That's a common mistake that I usually see among students doing their manuscript. What they have written in the findings, they repeat it in the conclusion. And then in the recommendation is not one-to-one. It just so happened that there are also three recommendations here. So it does not mean that recommendation one is aligned to conclusion one and finding one. Does not. So all the recommendations could be aligned to just one of the problem. Or you could have at least one recommendation for each of the problem. But the recommendations are not in any way related to the number of conclusions or number of findings. Now, there is a note there in red text. Of course, in the final manuscript, you remove the red text. The total number of pages of the abstract should not exceed 3. So please take note of that. Your abstract should not be more than 3 pages. So that's the maximum number of pages. It's also impossible for you to have an abstract of 1 page only. So I would expect that you would be using the 3 pages. Even 2 pages only, sometimes students are having difficulties. There are even some students who would say, "Sir, we need to go beyond 3 pages." But the rule says that you should not go beyond 3 pages. So that's the maximum number of pages. 3 pages. Do not go beyond 3 pages. Before we go on, I almost forgot. Going back to the title page, if you would see, would be double spaced. By the way, in terms of the margin, the left margin is 1.5 inches and the rest are 1 inch. So that's the margin. Left margin is 1.5 inches. The rest, top, bottom, and right margins are all 1 inch each. The title page is double spaced. The approval sheet is single space. And the abstract is single space. The entire manuscript is double spaced except for approval sheet and abstract. These are the only two parts of the manuscript that should be written in single space. All the other pages, all the other parts are all double space. So the title page is double space, and starting with the acknowledgement up to the last page, all double spaces. So that should be clear. So let me repeat that for the last time. The entire manuscript is double space except for the approval sheet, which is single space, and the abstract, which is also single space. Then we go to acknowledgement. In the acknowledgement, this is where you write and identify. You write and show your gratitude to some people who help you out in this study. So that's the acknowledgement. Again, since you are alone in your study, there should only be one initials there, just your initials. So if your name, for example, is Jose de la Cruz Reyes, so your initials would be JDR. So you just write your initials. And your initials should be 3 single spaces from the last line. So that's your initial. In the acknowledgement, as I mentioned earlier, you identify here the people or even entities that help you out in your study, in your MIT, and then you recognize them. Acknowledgement should be written in third person. So it should be in third person. So you should, we should not see there we. So it should always be the researcher, he, she. So refer to yourself in third person. So you always say the researcher would like to recognize. The researcher would want to say his or her gratitude to. So that's the acknowledgement. There's no limit on the number of pages for the acknowledgement, but normally acknowledgement would be 1 to 2 pages. And again, before we go on, there are items that I almost forgot to mention. Title page is one page only. Approval sheet is one page only. Abstract is up to 3 pages. The title page does not have any header or footer. The approval sheet, no header also. The Capstone Project, the first page, no header. But if you go to the second page, there's a header there. So what do you write there? Capstone Project Abstract, and then the page number. So if there are 3 pages, the third page would again be Capstone Project Abstract, and then the page number. Acknowledgement, the first page, no header. So if your acknowledgement is more than a page, so if it's 2 or 3 pages, the second page and the third page would also have a header. So what you will write there would be acknowledgement and page number. This is also true for dedication. For dedication, there are no restrictions here. You could write your dedication in any way you want it to be written. It could also be in first person if you want, or it could be in third person still if you want. So that's the dedication. So similarly, if you have more than two, you have more than a single, you have more than a page for dedication. The second page up to the last page, you would have a header. So similarly, there's no header for the first page of the dedication. Then we have here the table of contents. So you also notice that for the table of contents, the first page, no header. The second page, there's a header. So that's also true for list of figures and list of tables. Now, for the table of contents, you will not be changing anything on the text except for the page numbers. So the title page would be unchanged, approval sheet, capstone project abstract, acknowledgement, indication, table of contents, list of figures, list of tables. You just state the actual pages. For project overview, the same thing. No change on background, review, company profile, importance, problem, objective of the study, and the definition of terms. You will only change the page number. For methodology, the same. No changes on software development methodology, design thinking process, scope and delimitation of the study, data gathering techniques, and sources of data. You will only put the actual pages. It's in chapter 3, discussion of findings, where you will change the label here. The labels here are answers for SOP number 1, answers for SOP number 2, and answers for SOP number 3. What will you write here? What you will write here would be the subtitle for your presentation of your findings of each of the SOP. So meaning you go to chapter 3. Let's just jump to chapter 3. In chapter 3, you will write here the title. What's your title for the discussion of your findings? Well, it just so happened that the title that I placed here, the working title, is answer for SOP number 1. That's the reason why in the table of contents, it's also answer for SOP number 1. So whatever title you will use here would be what you will be writing in the table of contents. But of course, you change this. Do not say answer for SOP1, answer for SOP2, answer for SOP3. As an example, as we have mentioned earlier, if your SOP number 1 will be focused on the requirements, then you could say here, you could use here a title as requirements for the design and development of the proposed information system. So that could be your title here. Similarly, if your SOP number 3 would be focused on determining the usability, the level of usability, then you could say here, level of usability of the proposed information system. So if your title here would be level of usability of the proposed information system, then in the table of contents, that's what you will write here. So you would say here, level of usability of the proposed information system. So you change the titles here. The systems architecture is fixed. By the way, I could recall there were students who we included in the statements of the problem or objectives of the study, the systems architecture. So if you are one of these few students, because I know there are only around 2 or 3 of them, where an additional SOP was included focusing on the systems architecture. If your study, or if you are one of these few students whose statement of the problems or objectives of the study include a statement on systems architecture, then you remove this. But for the rest, for most of you, you do not have any SOP or any objective on systems architecture, so you include this. This is mandatory. Then we have conclusions and recommendations. This will also be unchanged. Conclusions, you will just put the page numbers. And then the references, you just put the page number. So similarly with the answers, the titles in your discussions of findings, so the titles here, you will also put here the actual titles of the appendices. So if your appendix A, if you have 4 appendices, for example, what is the title of appendix A? You put it here. What is the title of appendix B? You put it here, and so on. So let's go to the sample appendices here. So you have here appendix A and then the title of appendix A. So whatever title you will write here for appendix A is what you would be putting in the table of contents, the title. And lastly, curriculum vitae. Now, there's one item that I would want to also want you to be conscious about. You notice the last dots are all aligned. Even that, we check that. All the final dots. It doesn't matter the first dots. They are not aligned, obviously, but all the last dots should be aligned. So if you notice here, all the dots, particularly the last dots, are aligned. Even the other dots, if you notice, they're all aligned. They only start at different locations depending on how long the text. So similarly for list of figures, if you have more than one page, this page does not have any header, but the second page, you say there list of figures and then page number. So the same thing, you write here the title of the figures. So if, say, for example, figure 1 refers to the methodologies. For example, figure 1 is the FDD model, then you say here, figure 1, FDD model, and so on. And then the last dots are also aligned. And then you put the actual pages where the figures are found. That's also true for the tables. And then we have here chapter 1. So for chapter 1, you notice we have here the chapter number, and then we have here the chapter name. After the chapter name, we go directly to the first component of chapter 1. There are no discussions in between. Unlike for chapter 2, look at chapter 2. Between the name of the chapter and the first component of the chapter, there is a chapter introduction. That's also true for chapter 3. There is a chapter introduction. And chapter 4, there is a chapter introduction. What do we put in the chapter introduction? You just introduce what are the items that you will discuss in that chapter. So in the chapter introduction of chapter 4, you just mentioned that you will have a discussion there of the conclusions and recommendations. Similarly, in the introduction of chapter 3, you just mentioned there what are you going to discuss. So particularly the answers, these ones. In chapter 2, introduction, you will also mention that in this chapter, we will be talking about the software development methodology, we'll be talking about design thinking, you'll be talking about scope and delimitation, and so on. But in chapter 1, I repeat, do not put any introduction for chapter 1. So you say chapter 1, chapter title, go directly to the first part of chapter 1. So the first part of chapter 1 will be the background of the study. You've actually started doing this in your Capstone Project 1. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 were actually asked from you in your Capstone Project 1. So there should be no problem really for Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. because you've already started with that last term. You just need to finalize it. Of course, whatever you submitted last term, there are changes and there are modifications. And while you are doing your Capstone Project 2 requirements, you would even realize that there are things that you would need to include or you would need to remove in your Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. So you are expected to also continuously improving your Chapter 1 and 2. And you will not use as is the chapters 1 and 2 that you submitted last term. And then you have here review of related literature, company profile, importance of the study. You're all familiar with this. Statement of the problem. These were already finalized during your Capstone Project 1 presentation. Objectives of the study. These were also finalized. Definition of terms. Chapter 2, software development methodology, design thinking process, scope and delimitation, data gathering techniques, sources of data. All these were started in your Capstone Project 1. In terms of the components, there are no changes. So what we just expect you to do for Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 is to polish whatever you generated during your Capstone Project 1 and 2. So meaning for Capstone Project 2, it's really Chapter 3 where you would be starting from whatever data you would be able to collect. So insert here chapter introduction. I repeat, in chapter introduction would simply be to introduce what you will discuss. So if, say for example, your answer for SOP number 1 title talks about the um, the requirements, and then this would talk about framework or architecture probably, or features, and then this would talk about let's say the usability. So I repeat, so if the first problem is on the requirements, the second problem would be on the features, and the third problem would be on the usability. Then in the introduction, you will simply say that this chapter will focus on the presentation of the findings that are relevant to the requirements to design and develop the proposed system. Similarly with the features of the proposed system and the level of usability of the final developed system. So something like that's what you would be writing here. So in your presentation of the findings, you would be putting here some diagrams and some figures. And I know that some diagrams and some tables, I should say. Diagrams and figures will be the same. So they would simply be referred to as figures. And you have seen the comments during your Capstone Project 1 in putting diagrams and in putting tables. What I want to emphasize would be for tables. Tables should be hanging tables. So far, all of you, I could recall all of you included at least one table and included at least one figure. So you are familiar with the format of tables and the figures. And then we have here conclusions and recommendations. So recall earlier that in the abstract, you have their conclusions and recommendations. So whatever conclusions and recommendations are written in the abstract should be exactly the same with the conclusions and recommendations written in chapter 4. So sometimes students would start writing first the conclusions and recommendations in the abstract, and then they just copy it in chapter 4. Or if you started writing the conclusions and recommendations in chapter 4, you just copy that in the abstract. They should be exactly the same. Even the introduction of the conclusion and then the items in the conclusion, exactly the same. The only difference is that in the abstract, it's single space. Here, it's double space, but they are exactly the same. Then we have here the references and the appendices. So similarly, if you have multiple references, the second page would be labeled the reference plus the page number on the header. For the appendices, I would want to emphasize something on the appendices. The first page of every appendix does not have a header. So for example, Appendix A has 2 pages. The first page does not have a label, but on the second page, you put there a label. So what you will put there will be appendices, not Appendix A. So appendices page number. Similarly, if your Appendix B has 3 pages, the first page does not have a header, but the second page and third page, you put a header. So what do you put in the header? Appendices, not Appendix B. Appendices page number. So if Appendix C has 10 pages, the first page does not have a header label. But the second page up to the 10th page, they will all be labeled appendices followed by the page number. And lastly, the curriculum vitae. So you just follow this format of the curriculum vitae. So if you have more than a page for the curriculum vitae, you also put a header and page number on the second page. And there's another note here, curriculum vitae should not be more than 2 pages. It's only in the abstract and in the curriculum vitae where there's a limit on the number of pages. So your abstract should not be more than 3 pages. Your curriculum vitae should not be more than 2 pages. And sorry, by the way, I mentioned earlier that the only parts of the manuscript which are single spaces are the title, I know, the approval sheet and the abstracts. I'm sorry, but it also includes the curriculum vitae. So 3, not 2. So I repeat, the approval sheet, the abstracts, and the curriculum vitae are all single pages. All the other parts of the manuscript are double pages. You would actually see later why we are strict with the number of pages for the curriculum vitae and the abstract, and why the curriculum vitae, abstract, and approval sheet are single pages, are single spaces, I should say. Another normal concern of students would be, sir, what should be bolden and what should not be bolden? So you just use this format. So in the title page, it's only the title which is bold. In the approval sheet, it's only the label approval sheet which is bold. No other parts of the approval sheet should be bolded. For the capstone abstract, the label capstone abstract is bold. Your name is also bold. The title, I should say, the title of the study is bold, including your name. And then the labels, rationale of the study, summary, findings, conclusions, and recommendations. These are the only bolden text. And if you notice, for 8.1, rationale and background of the study, 8.2 summary, 8.3 findings, the numbers are not bold. 8.1 is not bold. 8.2 is not bold. 8.3 is not bold. 8.4 is not bold. 8.5 is not bold. So all these are checked before you are allowed to bind your manuscript. So as early as now, you start following the formats. You know, there were instances in the past where students, some of the students, it took them so long to finalize their manuscript, not because they have problems with the content, but because they cannot follow the format. So even the format would be important. So if you cannot follow the format, even if the content are already accepted by the panel members and the advisor, you will not be allowed to finalize your manuscript. So if your manuscript is not finalized, it's not binded, your grade would not be released. Another item that I would want to emphasize, the header label is size 9, while the discussions are all size 12. All discussions are size 12. From the title page up to the curriculum vitae, all are size 12. Courier News size 12. It's only the label of the header plus the page number which are size 9. So please take note of that. So label and page number, header, size 9. From title page up to curriculum vitae, size 12. All text should be in Courier New. Except for figures. For figures, the font type could be a different font type. But for even tables should be Courier New, size 12. Tables should also be Courier New, size 12, double space. Sir, what if I have a table? I want the table to be not in hanging table format, and I want the table to make use of a different font size, make use of a different font type, and I want to color my table. Can I do that? Yes, but you should convert it as a figure. Do not present it as a table. So there are students who usually do that. If they want to emphasize something on the table, they do not want to follow the format of the table. Like they do not want the table content to be double spaced. They want it to be single spaced, and they want some of the text to be smaller. They want some of the text to be highlighted by putting some colors. What they do is to convert the table into a figure. You can also do that. What else? What are the other things that I usually notice? And yes, by the way, all manuscript would pass to my office. I will be the last one to say whether you could bind or not your manuscript. So whether I am your advisor or not, whether I am a panel or not, whether I am your teacher in charge or not, your final manuscript would pass to my office, and I would be the one to say whether you could proceed with the binding or not of the manuscript. So I check these things. So similarly for acknowledgement, it's only the acknowledgement label and then the initials, which are bolden. Dedication, it's only the dedication which is bolden. Table of contents, this is the only thing which is bolden, the label, table of contents. List of figures, it's just the label, list of figures. Likewise with list of tables. For chapter 1, just the label of the chapter and then the title of the components of chapter 1, which are bolden. No other parts, no other text should be bolden. So likewise with methodology, discussions, conclusions and recommendations, references. So only the label references plus the sub-classifications or classifications of the references, which are bolden. Then appendices. Do not bolden the appendix letter and the appendix title. Just the label appendices should bolden. So if you have appendix B plus the title of appendix B should not also be bolden. So for curriculum vitae, it's just the label curriculum vitae, your name, and then the labels personal information, educational attainment, work history, IT skills certification, research presentation, and publication should be bolden. Sir, what if I have 100 research presentations and publications? What should I do? You just choose what you will be writing here. Because remember, you're only limited to 2 pages. Similarly, sir, I have 50 certifications. You just choose. You cannot put everything in your CV. Because there were instances in the past where some students tried to put 10 pages for their CV. So you're only limited to 2 pages. So are there any questions so far? Or clarifications, concerns? Anyone who has a concern or would want to clarify anything? Sir, how many pages should our final manuscript be? Although this is not written in any of our policies and guidelines, but we have an unwritten understanding among MIT faculty members that an MIT manuscript should not be less than 100 pages, from the title page up to the curriculum vitae. So I repeat, we do not have any written um, rules, not even in our policies and guidelines. But this is something that we agreed on in principle with all faculty members. Any clarifications? Anything that you would want to clarify or ask? None. Nobody's reacting, so I hope that it's because things are clear. There's a question here, sir. Will the panel members check the revisions of the manuscript or the advisor only? Um, Initially, the checking would be done by the advisor. Once the manuscript is approved by the advisor, that's the only time you share it with the panel members. So do not go yet with the panel member unless the manuscript is already approved by the advisor. So another question here, because for students who are enrolled in the sections that I am handling, I am asking you to submit your manuscript by October 18. What I'm asking you to submit is the one that you modified from the presentation in Capstone Project 1. So remember in Capstone Project 1, you did chapter 1 and 2, and then there were recommendations. That's what I am asking you to submit. Not yet the final with chapter 3 and 4. Not yet the other parts. So I am not yet expecting you to put the acknowledgement, the dedication, just the manuscript that you did for Capstone 1. Yun lang. And then you just do the modifications based on the recommendations. So that's what you will be submitting. Other concerns? While waiting for other possible concerns, let me just um, remind all of you of the publication requirement. When you defended your Capstone Project 1 last term, during the presentation, you were asked whether you already did the publication for MIT or not. So there were a few who said yes, they already did the publication. There are also a few who said they are just waiting for the release of the publication. But majority of you said you have not done any publications yet when you did the academic courses. So as agreed and as mentioned, you will not be allowed to defend your capstone project 2 not unless you show us your publication. So it could be already published by the time you defend, or if not yet published, you show us any proof, document saying that your paper is accepted and that they are processing the publication. So that means that it's already accepted. You are just waiting for the publication date. So far, the manuscript that you will be submitting by October 18, well, of course, it's expected that you are communicating with your advisor. So this is something that should have been checked by your advisor, something that should have been read by your advisor. Other concerns? I guess there are no additional concerns aside from the ones that were sent. How about you, Ibrahim? Are there any concerns sent to you?
I guess none, sir, on my end. I guess one question that was being asked by a few students in my classes was, when is their, I guess, deadline for their, when should they finish their defense or their study rather, uh, for this sem?
Um, as long as they could defend it, because there's a policy of the university that students can only defend capstone project, even thesis, dissertation in the undergrad and in the graduate school if they're officially enrolled. So if you are not enrolled, then you cannot defend. So technically, that means that they need to defend before the start of the next term. Our for second trimester will start by January 4. So that means that you should have defended before January 4. Or at least, if there are some concerns with scheduling, you should have been scheduled before January 4. So we could extend a little bit the defense on the first few weeks of January as long as your study had been accepted for presentation before January 4. In the past, we also do that due to some problems on scheduling, although the student is already done and the study is acceptable for presentation prior to the start of the following term, there were instances where we scheduled the defense on the first few weeks of the following term. So for that particular question, the safest would be for you to defend until December. Otherwise, if you will not defend by December, then following the policy of the university, you need to re-enroll by January. That's the policy. And of course, another consideration is that your paper. So you should be at this point of time working with your advisor, not just on your manuscript, not just on your prototypes, but also on your publication. Because remember, we cannot schedule you and we will not schedule you for final defense, not unless you have proof that you are already done with the publication requirement.
Noted on that, sir. I'll inform my students as well. Another question, sir, is for the publication. Um, I informed my students that, as long as they present the approval email or approval communication, that would count as publication. I just want to confirm if that's still applicable.
Not approval of the acceptance, but approval of the publication. Meaning, let me give an example. Assuming you chose to do publication through conference proceeding. So meaning you do a presentation on a conference, then the conference will submit your paper on a journal. So assuming that's what you would be doing. So what we will accept would not be the acceptance of the conference, but the acceptance of the journal. So even if your paper is accepted for presentation, if it is not accepted for publication,
Noted, sir. On the publications.
Sorry for that. As I was saying earlier, Ibrahim, the acceptance would be an acceptance by the publisher saying that the paper is accepted for publication and will be released on a particular date. So not acceptance in a conference, not acceptance of the paper. And that means that you should have processed all the requirements.
Noted, sir. I'll inform the students. Thank you.
And by the way, the university had just released a statement that all incoming publications should be done in journals indexed by Scopus. Because in the past, we have been accepting publications by students in journals indexed by Scopus and Web of Science or ISI in the past. But for this trimester, starting this trimester, all publications, meaning if you haven't submitted yet your paper for publication to any conference or any journal, then you need to choose a conference and a journal that does publication indexed by Scopus. So we will no longer accept publications in journals indexed by ISI or Web of Science only without the Scopus. So that's a new statement released by the university just this term. Sir, how about if we've already started our processing? So we've already submitted, sir, our paper. We are just waiting for confirmation. And the journal is not indexed by Scopus, it's indexed by ISI. Does that mean that we will still change? If you've already started the processing and the journal is not Scopus indexed, but indexed by ISI and Web of Science, then that is still acceptable. So the new rule only applies for those who have not started processing yet their publications. So you might be asking why the new rule? Because accrediting bodies, we have noticed, the university noticed that most, if not all of the accrediting bodies that we've been through for the past few months, past few trimesters, only recognize Scopus. A good example would be the application for autonomous. I don't know if your school, the school that you belong to, applied for autonomous deregulated status. Only Scopus indexed papers were accepted in the counting. Similarly, if you apply to Times Higher ranking and even in QS ranking, they only recognize Scopus. I guess, Ibrahim, there are no other concerns. Any final announcement before we end our meeting?
None, sir, on my end, for my classes. I guess I'll just make announcements along later to re-echo what was mentioned here.
Okay. Since there are no other concerns and there are no announcements from Ibrahim, I guess that ends our discussion. If there would be need for another discussions later on, depending on the feedback that we will get from the advisors and from Mr. Ibrahim, we'll be setting another meeting. But if things are doing well, then there would be no need for us to set another meeting for all the students. But we could schedule some meetings, one-on-one meetings if needed with few students with concerns. For those who are already done with their publications, you communicate with your advisor. So your advisor would be the one to communicate with us, because your advisor will only endorse you for defense once you have the proof that you did the publication. So all your proof, all the documents, submit it to your advisor. So again, good afternoon and thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. And uh, see you all as well to the Capstone students. For those under my class, just make sure to check the announcements later, maybe later this week or next week.